Director Tae Young walked through the quiet halls of Sentinel Station, humanity's biggest deep space monitoring base. 50 years had passed since the Silence War, and the galaxy was a very different place. Where once thousands of civilizations had filled the stars with noise and trade, now there were only scattered whispers from small groups of survivors. The Galactic Monitoring Network spread across known space like a huge web of sensors and communication stations. Every human outpost, every colony ship, every exploration vessel helped gather information for a system designed to spot the smallest hint of collective mind expansion. Humanity had become the galaxy's immune system, forever watching for another silence. "Any strange readings today?" Tae Young asked Lieutenant Yoon-soo, the station's main analyst. "Nothing serious, sir," she replied, studying the displays that showed communication patterns across 17 sectors. "We detected some coordinated ship movements in the Vega system, but it turned out to be refugees from the old Rock People colonies organizing a supply convoy." Tae Young nodded, feeling the familiar mix of relief and sadness that came with such reports. Every sign of organization in space now triggered automatic alerts, a legacy of trauma that would probably last for generations. Humanity had saved themselves and what remained of galactic civilization, but the price had been constant suspicion of anything that looked like collective action. Captain Suman guided her exploration ship. Remember them through the ruins of what had once been the great trading hub of Nexus Prime. The massive space station had housed 50 million beings from dozens of species before the silence came. Now it was a tomb, its corridors empty except for the memorial plaques that human recovery teams had installed over the decades. Her crew was unique in the new galaxy. Humans working alongside aliens who had survived the mass mind control or been successfully freed from silence control. Dr. Junho, her chief medical officer, specialized in helping survivors who still struggled with the mental damage of having their minds controlled. "Captain, we are receiving a distress signal," reported Navigation Officer Hee-jin. "It is coming from the old Bug People sector about 3 light years from here." Sumin felt her heart beat faster. 50 years after the war, they still occasionally found survivors hiding in remote systems, afraid to use any technology that might attract attention. Every rescue was precious. Another voice added back to the galaxy's diminished chorus. The distress signal led them to a small asteroid mining station where a group of mixed-species refugees had been living in isolation for decades. Among them was an elderly rock person named Gulnak, who had escaped the initial mind control and spent 50 years believing he might be the last of his kind. "Are there others?" he asked in his deep, rumbling voice as Dr. Junho checked his health. "Are there others like me who remember what we used to be?" "Yes," Sumin replied gently. "Not many, but yes. There are communities throughout the galaxy where survivors are building new lives together." On the recovered world of New Cathara, Colony Administrator Gun Wu oversaw one of humanity's most ambitious projects. The planet had been completely emptied during the Silence War, its cities abandoned and its great hive structures silent. But slowly, carefully, life was returning. The colony was unique. Humans working alongside the children and grandchildren of Bug People survivors. Teacher Ye Jin ran a school where human children learned about galactic history alongside young Bug People who were still developing individual personalities after generations of their species had lived under collective influence. "Today we are going to learn about the great libraries of Nexus Prime," she told her mixed species class. Before the war, they contained the collected knowledge of 40 different civilizations. "Who can tell me why it is important to preserve different ways of thinking?" A young bug person raised her hard arm. "Because when everyone thinks the same way, nobody can see problems from different angles," she said in the careful, formal speech that her species used when speaking individually rather than in groups. "That is right, Kexara." Ye-jin smiled. "Diversity is not just pretty, it is practical. It makes us all smarter and stronger." The lesson was one that the entire galaxy was still learning. The new communities that had emerged from the ashes of the old civilizations were smaller and more cautious, but they carried within them something that the silence could never understand: the stubborn insistence on remaining individually alive. Ambassador Mi-sun traveled between these scattered communities in her diplomatic ship, helping negotiate trade agreements and mutual defense pacts between groups that might never have worked together in the old galaxy. A former gas cloud research station now housed refugees from 6 different species. An abandoned rock people mining facility had become a thriving art colony, where survivors from various worlds expressed their trauma and hope through creative work. The new galaxy was quieter than the old one, but it was not empty. And more importantly, it was truly free in a way the old galaxy had never been. Every being who had survived the silence had chosen to remain individual, chosen to think for themselves, chosen to accept the chaos and uncertainty that came with independent consciousness. Admiral Chang Min, now elderly and serving as head of the Galactic Defense Council, often stood in the memorial chamber aboard Unity Station. The walls displayed holographic images of all the alien beings humanity had known before the war. Friends, colleagues, former enemies who had become allies. Their images flickered in endless loops, preserved in memory because their physical selves had been consumed by a force that saw their individual thoughts as problems to be solved. "Do you think we did the right thing?" asked his aide, a young officer named Jung Woo who had been born after the war and knew the diverse galaxy only through historical records. Chang Min considered the question carefully. "We saved what we could save," he said finally. "We could not save our friends, but we saved the idea of friendship. We could not save the old civilizations, but we saved the right to build new ones. Maybe that is enough." The most important discovery came not from human exploration, but from the galaxy itself. Deep space monitoring stations detected something that changed everything. Signals from beyond the galactic rim, chaotic and individual and unmistakably alive. Director Sai Wu, grandson of the legendary Admiral Seok Jin, stood in the command center of Terra Station as the analysis came in. The signals were coming from the Andromeda Galaxy, nearly 3 million light-years away. They showed all the signs of diverse independent civilizations, thousands of different species, each with their own unique communication patterns and technological approaches. "They are not collective," reported Chief Analyst Park Ho, his voice filled with excitement and hope. "Every signal is different. They are individuals, all of them. They are arguing with each other, trading, competing, cooperating. Everything that made our galaxy special before the war." Siwoo felt something he had not experienced in decades. Genuine hope about the future. Somewhere in the vast cosmos, intelligence had evolved again. Diverse and chaotic and beautifully free. And this time, humanity would not let it face the darkness alone. The decision to make contact was not made quickly or lightly. The Galactic Council, now made up entirely of humans and the few dozen alien survivors who chose to participate in interspecies governance, debated for months about whether to send signals to Andromeda. Some argued that contact was too dangerous, that it might attract the attention of other forces like the Silence. Others said that isolation had never protected anyone, that the only way to preserve freedom was to share it with others who valued independence. In the end, the vote was close but decisive. Humanity would send a message to Andromeda, not as conquerors or missionaries, but as fellow guardians of individual consciousness. The message that went out across the void between galaxies was simple. This is a greeting from the Milky Way galaxy to any free-thinking beings who might receive this transmission. We are humans and our surviving friends, the guardians of diversity in our part of the universe. We have faced forces that sought to eliminate individual thought, and we have survived. You are not alone. If you ever face threats to your independence, know that somewhere across the darkness others remember what it means to choose your own thoughts. We are the guardians now, and we remember what was lost. Choose to remain yourself, and you will never stand alone. The message would take 3 million years to reach its destination, but time moved differently for a species that had learned to think in geological epochs. Humanity had evolved from explorers to guardians, from a young species seeking acceptance to the keepers of freedom itself. They had paid the ultimate price for their victory, the loss of almost everything they had fought to protect. But they had also learned the most important lesson in the universe. Individual consciousness was not just worth preserving, it was worth sharing. The galaxy was quieter now, but it was not silent. In research stations and mining colonies, in art communities and trading posts, in schools where human children learned alongside the descendants of ancient alien civilizations, life continued. Different life than before, scarred by loss but strengthened by choice. Admiral Bora stood on the command deck of Luna Station, watching the biggest space battle in human history happen around Earth. For 7 days, the sky had been full of fire and death as humanity fought for the right to stay themselves. The Silence had not sent just one fleet to the solar system. They had sent everything. The combined warships of 24 alien civilizations, all perfectly controlled by a single mind. Thousands of ships moved through space like clockwork, each one a weapon used by minds that no longer belonged to their original owners. "Defense Grid 7 is failing," said Colonel Sung Ho from the Ground Command Center. "We are losing orbital platforms faster than we can fix them." Bora looked at the battle displays, trying to find some way to win a fight that seemed hopeless. The human fleet was outnumbered 50-1. Their only advantage was being unpredictable. Every human captain made independent decisions that the Silence could not guess. But even chaos had limits when facing such huge numbers. Navigator Jenna flew her fighter squadron through the wreckage of what used to be the proud gas cloud research ship, Harmony of Minds. She remembered visiting that ship 2 years ago, walking through its living crystal hallways and meeting the gaseous beings who had shared their knowledge so freely with humanity. Now it was twisted metal and broken dreams, another victim of a war that should never have happened. Her squadron leader's voice came through the communication system. "Blue Squadron, we have bug people interceptors coming from Sector 7. Remember, those pilots used to be our friends. They are not in control of their actions." Jin'e checked her weapons and tried not to think about the beings inside those enemy fighters, somewhere behind those compound eyes. The real bug people pilots were trapped in their own minds, forced to watch as their bodies fought against the humans they had once called friends. Every enemy she killed was also a victim of the Silence. The breakthrough came from an unexpected place. Tactical Officer Hyun Jin had been studying enemy communication patterns for days, looking for any weakness in their perfect coordination. What he found changed the entire battle. "Admiral, I have got it," he called out from his analysis station. "The Silence keeps control through quantum connection networks. Every ship, every soldier, every controlled being is connected through instant communication. But quantum connections are fragile. If we can break the network at key points, we can destroy their coordination." Bora leaned over Hyunjin's shoulder, studying the data scrolling across his screens. "How do we break something we can barely see?" "Quantum resonance bombs," Hyunjin replied. "We build devices that create interference in the quantum field. Plant them on their command ships and we can cut entire sections of their fleet from the network." It was a desperate plan, but it was the only chance they had. Bora began giving orders to her captains, explaining the new strategy. They would sacrifice their heavy cruisers to get boarding parties onto the largest Silence ships, where teams of volunteers would plant quantum disruptors and try to escape before the bombs went off. Captain Soo-jin commanded one of the volunteer ships, the destroyer Incheon. Her mission was to ram through the defensive lines around the Silence flagship and deliver Commander Yo-jin's boarding party. It was basically a suicide mission, but every person on her ship had volunteered. "Remember," she told her crew over the ship's communication system, "we are not just fighting for humanity. We are fighting for every species that ever chose to think for themselves. The beings we are about to face were forced to become our enemies. Do not let their sacrifice be meaningless." The Incheon accelerated toward the Silence flagship, a massive ship that had once been the crystal diplomatic vessel Eternal Wisdom. The ship had been horribly changed, its beautiful crystal design replaced with organic machinery that pulsed with unnatural life. Biomechanical tentacles reached out from its hull, trying to grab human ships and drag them into processing chambers. Yo-jin's boarding party fought their way through corridors that had become something from a nightmare. The walls were lined with brain interface pods, each one containing the perfectly preserved body of a controlled being. Some of them were still conscious, their eyes following the humans as they passed, silently begging for an end to their suffering. "Plant the charges and get out," Yo-jin ordered her team. "We have maybe 10 minutes before this whole ship becomes too dangerous to escape." But as they moved deeper into the ship, they discovered something that made their mission both more important and more horrible. The ship's central chamber contained thousands of beings from dozens of species, all connected to a massive organic computer that processed their thoughts and memories. This was not just a command ship. It was a processing center, where the silence absorbed the knowledge and experiences of entire civilizations, adding their uniqueness to its collective consciousness while destroying their individuality forever. "We cannot just plant charges and leave," said Sergeant Minwoo, staring at the horror before them. "These beings are still alive. We have to try to free them." "We do not have time," Yojin replied. But even as she spoke, she was studying the interface systems, trying to understand how they worked. "The quantum disruptors will overload the neural networks when they explode. It might set them free." They planted the charges throughout the ship and began their desperate escape. Behind them, alarms began sounding as the silence realized what they had done. Biomechanical creatures that had once been living beings chased them through the twisting corridors, their movements too fast and too precise to be natural. The explosion that followed was unlike anything in recorded history. The quantum disruptors did not just destroy the ship. They sent feedback loops through the entire silence network, cutting connections across light years of space. For one terrible moment, hundreds of thousands of controlled beings throughout the solar system regained consciousness and remembered who they used to be. Many of them, realizing what they had become and what they had been forced to do, chose to end their own lives rather than continue existing as prisoners in their own bodies. Ships throughout the Silence Fleet began exploding as their crews destroyed themselves to escape their torment. The victory was swift after that. Cut off from their controlling network, the remaining Silence ships became confused and lost. Human ships trained to work independently picked them off one by one. Within hours, the space around Earth was filled with the wreckage of 24 alien fleets, but the cost was terrible. As rescue teams searched through the debris, they found few living prisoners. Most of the alien beings had died when their brain implants overloaded, or when they chose suicide over continued slavery. The galaxy's vast library of knowledge, culture, and diversity had been reduced to scattered memories and broken machines. President Dayun walked through the medical bays where human wounded were being treated alongside the few alien survivors they had managed to save. Dr. Kyung-ho worked frantically to remove silence implants from a young bug person who had somehow kept enough of himself to ask for help. "Will he live?" Taeyun asked. "His body will survive," Kyung-ho replied. "But his mind, I do not know if we can repair the damage." The silence did not just control these beings, they fed on their thoughts and memories. What is left might not be enough to keep individual consciousness. In another bed, a gas cloud survivor existed in a special containment field, her gaseous form flickering between colors of pain and confusion. She had been a famous artist before her control, creating light sculptures that had inspired beings throughout the galaxy. Now she could barely maintain a solid shape long enough to communicate. The final count was devastating. Of the trillions of intelligent beings that had lived in the galaxy before the silence, fewer than 1 million had survived with their consciousness intact. Most were scattered refugees hiding in remote systems, afraid to use any technology that might attract attention. Dayun spoke to the United Nations General Assembly from the rebuilt headquarters in New York. Representatives from human colonies throughout the solar system listened as she spoke words that would define their species. "Future role in the universe, we have won a victory," she began, her voice heavy with exhaustion and grief. "The silence is defeated and humanity remains free. But the price of that victory is almost beyond understanding. Civilizations that took millions of years to evolve have been destroyed in a matter of months. Friends who welcomed us into their worlds are gone forever." She paused, looking out at faces that reflected her own mixture of triumph and sorrow. "The galaxy is quiet now, not with the peace of happiness, but with the silence of the grave. And we are left to ask ourselves, what do we do with this victory that cost us everything we fought to protect?" The answer came from Commander Hae-won, who stood with a group of rescue mission volunteers. Her voice carried clearly through the chamber as she spoke. "We remember them. We make sure that what they were, what they dreamed of, what they created, none of it is forgotten. And we make damn sure that nothing like the silence ever happens again." The vote that followed was unanimous. Humanity would not retreat to the solar system to heal their wounds. They would spread throughout the galaxy, searching for survivors, protecting the remnants of destroyed. Fleet Admiral Seok-jin stood in the command center of Terra Station, watching the big screen that showed the galaxy falling apart. Red zones spread across the star map like a terrible disease. Each red zone meant a place where all communication had stopped. What used to be a busy, noisy galaxy full of different voices was becoming quiet and empty. All human ships must return to our solar system right now, he told his communication officers.
Any ship that sees non-human vessels should think of them as dangerous and stay away. The order felt like giving up before the real fight had started.
For 200 years, humans had dreamed of joining the galactic community. Now they were running home like scared children, leaving behind the friends and allies who had welcomed them into the stars. But those friends and allies were no longer themselves. Commander. HFY flew her stealth ship Ghostwalker through the empty space around what used to be the Great Nixari capital system. The beautiful crystal cities that had housed billions of people for thousands of years still moved around their star, but they were dark and silent. As she got closer, HFY saw things that would give her nightmares for the rest of her life. Huge biomechanical creatures like metal spiders the size of space stations moved between the planets. They stuck tentacle-like arms into the crystal cities and pulled out streams of organic material that they fed into vast machines. The worst part was that the organic material was still alive. HFY's sensors showed brain activity in the streams of matter being processed. Somewhere inside those horrible machines, the minds of entire civilizations were being harvested, sorted, and turned into something else. Ghostwalker to Terra Station, she sent through encrypted channels. The Nixari system. There is nothing left to save. The population is not dead. They are being processed, turned into something else. Back on Earth, General Insu worked on planetary defenses while trying not to think about the impossible task ahead. Every computer simulation his team ran ended the same way. When the silence came to the solar system, humanity would face the combined military power of every spacefaring species in the galaxy, all controlled by a single mind with perfect coordination. Chief Engineer Min Kyung worked day and night in the orbital shipyards, trying to change human technology to fight an enemy they barely understood. The problem was that human weapons were made to fight other humans, or maybe the occasional pirate ship. They had never been designed to face the coordinated fleets of entire star empires. We have one advantage, she told General Insu during their daily meeting. The silence's mind control tactics will not work on us. Our brain patterns are too individualistic, too chaotic. But that same chaos makes it harder for us to coordinate large fleet actions the way they can. Dr. Kyung Min studied captured silence technology in a heavily protected laboratory under Geneva. What he discovered changed everything they thought they knew about their enemy. The silence was not just an invading force. It was a collective consciousness that truly believed individual thought was a form of suffering. Every signal it sent, every brain implant it used, was designed not to control other beings but to free them from the burden of making their own decisions. They see themselves as doctors, he explained to a meeting of military leaders and scientists. From their point of view, every conscious being in the galaxy is sick with the disease of individuality. They are not conquering us, they are trying to cure us. This discovery made the enemy somehow more frightening. An evil invader could be fought and defeated. But how do you fight someone who truly believes they are helping you? The first silence fleet arrived at the edge of the solar system 3 months after the last human ship had returned home. Admiral Seokjin watched the sensor readings with a mixture of dread and heartbreak. The fleet was made up entirely of ships from species humanity had known and worked with for decades. There was the bug people battle cruiser Eternal Swarm, which had fought alongside human ships in the Rim Wars. The massive rock people dreadnought Pride of Thule had been humanity's flagship in the joint exploration of nearby galaxies. Even the delicate gas cloud science ships that had shared their knowledge so freely, with human researchers now moved in perfect formation toward Earth, but the beings flying those ships were no longer the allies humanity remembered. They were perfectly preserved bodies controlled by the collective will of the silence, their individual personalities erased and replaced with unified purpose. Captain Wu Jin commanded the Terran Defense Fleet's flagship, the battleship Seoul. As the enemy fleet got closer, he opened communication channels and tried one last desperate attempt. This is Captain Wu Jin of the Terran Defense Force to all ships in the approaching fleet. I know some of you can still hear me in there. Elder Vextar Thulgaran Nethara, I know you are fighting to break free. We remember who you used to be. The response came not from individuals but from all ships at the same time, speaking in perfect unison. Your friends no longer suffer the burden of choice. They have been freed from the chaos of individual thought. Submit to integration and you too will know peace. Never, Wu Jin replied and gave the order to attack. The Battle of Sol was unlike anything in recorded history. On one side, the perfectly coordinated fleets of the Silence moved with mechanical precision, every ship acting as part of a single huge mind. On the other side, human ships fought with desperate creativity, every captain making split-second decisions that no central intelligence could predict or counter. Navigator Jin flew her fighter through the wreckage of destroyed ships. Dodging energy blasts from vessels she had once thought of as friendly, she recognized the hull markings of the Rock People cruiser Stormbreaker. She had served on it during a joint training exercise 2 years ago, working alongside alien crewmates who had taught her card games and shared stories of their homeworlds. Now those same aliens were trying to kill her, their bodies preserved but their minds gone. The human strategy was pure chaos. Every ship acted independently, making random course changes and unpredictable attacks that the Silence could not see coming. It was like fighting smoke. Every time the collective intelligence thought it had predicted human behavior, the humans did something completely irrational. Tactical Officer Hyun Jin discovered the key to victory while analyzing enemy communication patterns during the heat of battle. The Silence kept perfect coordination through quantum communication networks that linked every ship in their fleet. But those same networks were vulnerable to disruption. All ships target their communication arrays, he broadcast to the human fleet. If we can cut their connections, they will lose coordination. The tide of battle began to turn. Human ships designed to work independently could fight well even when communication was disrupted. But silent ships dependent on their collective network became confused and lost when their quantum links were cut. Commander Yo-Jin led a boarding party onto the Silence command ship, a horrible fusion of vessels from a dozen different species. Fighting through corridors lined with brain interface pods containing the still-living bodies of controlled beings, her team planted quantum disruptors throughout the ship. The explosion that followed was not just physical but mental. The cutting of the command ship's network connection sent feedback loops through every silent ship in the system. For one terrible moment, thousands of controlled aliens regained consciousness and realized what they had become. Many chose to destroy their own ships rather than continue existing as prisoners in their own bodies. When the battle ended, space around Earth was filled with wreckage. The Silence fleet was destroyed, but the victory felt empty. As rescue teams searched through the debris, they found few survivors. Most of the alien beings had died when their brain implants overloaded, finally free but too late to matter. President Da-un spoke to the survivors from the rebuilt United Nations headquarters. Representatives from human colonies throughout the solar system gathered to hear words that would define humanity's future. "We have won this battle," she said, looking out at faces marked by exhaustion and grief. "But the galaxy we fought to protect is gone. Our friends, our allies, our trading partners, they are all dead or lost to the Silence. We saved ourselves, but we could not save them." The silence that followed was heavy with sadness for civilizations that had taken millions of years to evolve, only to be wiped out in a few months by an enemy that thought it was helping them. The galaxy was quiet now, but humanity had learned something important. Sometimes being alone is the price of staying free, and they would make sure that freedom was worth preserving for anyone else who might be out there, still thinking for themselves. The big meeting hall was full of strange creatures. Some looked like giant bugs. Others floated in water tanks. A few were so tall they had to bend down to fit inside. All of them were staring at one human man who stood in the middle of the room. Hyunwoo felt very small. His hands were shaking as he held his datapad. Behind him, a big screen showed pictures of star maps with red warning signs all over them. The alien creatures made weird noises, clicking, humming, and rumbling sounds that their machines turned into words he could understand. Up in the watching area, Taemin looked down at his friend. Taemin was a soldier who had seen many battles, but he had never seen anything like this. The humans had found something scary moving through space, something that made whole star systems go quiet. The aliens called it the Silence, but they talked about it like it was just bad weather, not something that could kill everyone. "Listen to me, please," Hyunwoo said. His voice carried to every corner of the big hall. "Our space watchers have seen something very bad. Big fleets of ships are moving together across many star systems. This is not pirates or traders. This looks like an army getting ready to attack. A bug-like creature made clicking sounds. Its name was Elder Vextar, and he was the leader of his people. The machine that turned his clicks into words said, "You humans worry too much. You lived alone for too long. You do not understand how space works." Other aliens agreed with him. The gas cloud beings changed colors in a way that meant they thought humans were silly. The giant rock people made deep sounds that meant they thought humans were scared of nothing. Hyunwoo felt his face get hot with anger. "We have proof," he said, pointing at the big screen. "Look at these patterns. Ships going missing. Strange signals. Systems that stopped talking to anyone." But the aliens were not looking at his proof. They were looking at each other with expressions that seemed like they knew something the humans did not know. Hyunwoo saw this but could not understand what it meant. Very far away on a space station near Earth, Captain Ji-Hai was looking at computer screens full of numbers and lines. Her job was to listen to all the radio signals that came from across the galaxy. Most of it was normal stuff. People buying and selling things, weather reports from distant planets, families sending messages to each other. But some signals were different. "Captain, you need to see this," said Dong-hyuk. He was young and good with computers. His face was white with fear as he stared at his screen. "These signal patterns are not random." Ji-Hai walked over to look. At first it looked like normal space noise, the kind of radio waves that stars and planets make naturally. But when Dong-hyuk highlighted certain parts, she could see a pattern. The signals were giving orders. They were math-based and very precise and definitely made by someone smart. Someone was sending commands to groups of ships all across the galaxy. The scary part was how organized it all looked. Whoever was sending these orders had forces everywhere, near the bug people's worlds, close to the gas cloud trading posts, around the rock people's colonies. "How long have these signals been active?" Ji asked. Dong-hyuk checked his computers, looking at months of old recordings. His face got even whiter. "Captain, some of these patterns go back 2 years. Maybe longer. We just never noticed because they were hidden in normal background noise." Ji-Hai felt cold fear in her stomach. 2 years meant this army had been getting ready for a very long time. It also meant they were very good at hiding what they were doing. No army could organize across such big distances without someone noticing unless what? She asked herself out loud. Unless they had help from people already inside, Dong-hyuk said, finishing her thought. Back at the big meeting, things were getting worse. The alien leaders had voted to ignore Earth's warnings. 47 groups voted against believing the humans. Only one small group that included both humans and aliens voted to take the warning seriously. Elder Vextar came over to talk to Hyunwoo as everyone was leaving. Up close, the bug-like creature looked even stranger. His big compound eyes reflected the crystal lights of the hall in ways that hurt to look at. "Ambassador?" Vextar said through his translation machine. "Your people mean well, but you must understand something. The galaxy is very big and very old. Many things move through space that young species do not understand. What you call the silence is just a natural thing that happens sometimes. Natural things do not give orders to armies." Hyunwoo replied. Vextar tilted his head in a way that suggested he found this funny. "How can you be sure? Your people have been in space for less than 200 years. We bug people have explored the stars for over 3,000 years. Trust our experience." But as Vextar talked, Hyunwoo noticed something strange. The alien's way of talking was slightly different from their earlier meetings. More formal, more empty. Like he was reading words from a script instead of thinking about what to say. Taemin joined Hyunwoo as they left the meeting hall. The older man had been watching the alien leaders carefully during the whole session. As a military man, he was trained to notice when people were lying or hiding things. "They know more than they are telling us," Taemin said quietly as they walked through the station's hallways. "Did you see how they looked at each other when you showed the invasion data?" "I saw," Hyunwoo replied. "It was like they expected it." "Or like they already knew about it," Taemin added. Their talk was interrupted by an urgent call from Earth. Captain Ji-Hai's face appeared on Hyunwoo's personal communicator. She looked worried and scared. "Ambassador, we have a big problem," she said without saying hello first. "The signal patterns we found are not just coordination orders. We studied the quantum frequencies, and they are designed to connect directly with biological brains. Someone is sending commands straight into living minds." Hyunwoo felt the blood leave his face. "Which species?" "All of them," Ji-Hai replied. "Every major alien race has the right kind of brain structure to receive these signals. The bug people's compound brains, The gas cloud's collective consciousness, the rock people's pack-mind connections. They are all vulnerable to this kind of control. And humans? Our brain patterns are too chaotic and individualistic. The signals cannot get a stable connection to human brains. We are the only species that is naturally protected. As he understood what this meant, Hyunwoo looked back toward the meeting hall where the alien leaders were still having their final discussions and social meetings. How many of them were still really themselves? How many were already under the control of whatever force was sending those signals? The warning they had tried to give was already too late. The invasion had not just started. It had been going on for years. And humanity was completely alone in a galaxy that no longer remembered how to be afraid. In the distance, the strange clicking and humming sounds of alien conversation continued. But now those sounds seemed different to human ears, less like the voices of friends and allies and more like the mechanical noises of machines pretending to be alive. The galaxy was changing, and only the humans could see it happening. They were about to discover that sometimes being the only ones who notice danger means being the only ones left to fight it, and fighting alone against an entire galaxy of controlled minds would test everything that made humanity special. The warning had been given. The aliens had refused to listen. Now all that remained was to see whether human stubbornness and chaos would be enough to survive what was coming next. Dr. So-young loved working on the spaceship with alien scientists. The ship was called New Horizon, and it had the smartest people from 6 different alien species. For 3 years they had worked together like a big happy family. They discovered amazing things about space and stars. So-young had made real friends with creatures that looked nothing like humans. But now something was very wrong. It started with small things. Thulgaran was a rock person scientist who had worked with So-young for 2 years. He was always very careful and patient with their experiments. But suddenly he started doing dangerous things. When So-young asked him why, Thulgaran would stare at her with empty eyes, then go back to work like she had not said anything. Nethara was even stranger. She was a gas cloud being who used to be very social and happy. Her colors would dance with excitement when they made new discoveries. Now she stayed in her special container for days without talking. When she did speak, her voice sounded flat and mechanical, like a broken computer. "Maybe they are just tired," said Dr. Ramos. He was the only other human on the ship. "We have been working very hard." But So-young knew this was not just tiredness. She had studied alien psychology for years. These changes were too big and too sudden to be natural. Her friends were acting like completely different people. The truth became clear during what should have been a simple experiment. They were testing quantum energy patterns in a small room. Without warning, Thulgaran started changing the machine settings. The energy readings went up to dangerous levels that could have killed everyone on the ship. "Thulgaran, stop," So-young shouted, running to the emergency controls. "You will blow up the whole ship." The big rock person turned toward her. So-young saw something that made her blood freeze. His eyes were completely blank, like looking into empty space. He moved toward her like a machine, his huge hands reaching out to grab her. So-young hit the emergency button just as Dr. Ramos arrived with security guards. Thulgaran fought them with impossible strength. He did not seem to care if he got hurt. When they finally stopped him, they found something horrible. Under Thulgaran's thick, rocky skin, metal wires pulsed with electric light. Someone had opened his skull and filled it with machines that connected to his brain. The real Thulgaran was still there, but something else was controlling his body. Far away on a planet called Kepler 442b, Colonel Minho was having his own problems. He was leading a peacekeeping mission to help solve a fight between human colonists and bug people miners. His team included soldiers from 4 different species. They had all worked together many times before. Everything went wrong during a normal patrol. Minho was walking with squad leader Kextik, a bug person soldier he had fought beside in 2 wars. They were talking about patrol routes when Kextik suddenly stopped and looked up at the sky. "Kextik, what is wrong?" Minho asked. The bug person did not answer. Instead, he attacked the nearest human soldier. His movements were faster and more precise than any living thing should be. His sharp arms moved like machine parts, hitting exactly the right spots to cause maximum damage. Minho pulled out his weapon, but he could not shoot his friend. "Kextik, stop!" "That is an order." Other bug people soldiers in the patrol started attacking too. They moved together perfectly, like parts of one big machine. When Minho's human soldiers shot back, The bug people showed no pain, no fear, and no desire to protect themselves. The fight ended when Sergeant Park damaged Kekstick's head with an explosive bullet. The bug person's hard skull cracked open, showing not insect biology but complicated electronic parts that sparked and smoked. Kekstick fell down, but just before he died, his compound eyes focused on Minho with an expression of pure terror. "Help me," he whispered through his broken translator, and then he was gone. Back on Earth, Intelligence Officer Yunji was putting the pieces together. Reports came in from all over human space about similar incidents. Alien crew members attacking their human friends. Diplomatic missions ending in violence. Trade meetings breaking down when alien representatives suddenly became hostile. The pattern was clear and scary. Every alien species that had dismissed humanity's warnings about the silence was now showing signs of mind control. Ships went dark in areas controlled by these species. Colonies stopped answering communication calls. Trade routes that had worked for decades were suddenly abandoned. Admiral Jae Sung called an emergency meeting of Earth's Defense Council. The big screen in the war room showed a map of known space. Dark zones spread like a disease across the galaxy. Red dots showed where human ships had lost contact with alien allies. Yellow dots showed star systems that had gone completely quiet. "The situation is worse than we thought," said Lieutenant Commander Yujin. She was the fleet's main analyst. Her voice was steady, but her hands shook as she worked the holographic display. "We are not just looking at an invasion. We are looking at total replacement." The display zoomed in on the bug people's home system. 3 weeks ago, it had been one of the busiest places in the galaxy, with thousands of ships moving between planets and space stations. Now the system looked completely empty, except for some huge structures that had not been there before. "Our long-range sensors detect artificial buildings around the major planets," Yujin continued. "They appear to be processing facilities of some kind. We are not sure what they are processing, but the power readings suggest very large industrial operations." Admiral Jae Sung studied the data with growing horror. He had spent 30 years in the military, fighting pirates and solving conflicts between species. But he had never seen anything like this. "How many systems have gone dark?" 47 confirmed, Yujin replied. "Another 63 are showing strange communication patterns. At this rate, we think complete galactic communication breakdown will happen within 6 months. The worst part was the timing. The behavioral changes in alien populations had started shortly after the Galactic Council meeting, where humanity's warnings were dismissed. It was like the act of warning the galaxy had somehow triggered a response from whatever force was behind the silence. Dr. Park was Earth's top expert on alien brains. He presented his analysis of the implants recovered from controlled aliens. The technology was unlike anything in the known galaxy, a perfect mixture of biological and mechanical parts that could connect directly with brain tissue. "The implants do not just control behavior," he explained. "They keep the host's memories and knowledge while taking over their decision-making. From the outside, the controlled individuals look normal. They can still do their jobs, maintain relationships, even talk about their hobbies, but they are no longer making their own choices." "So they are still alive in there?" asked Admiral Jae Sung. Dr. Park's face was grim. "In a sense, yes. But they are aware of everything they are being forced to do and completely unable to stop it. Based on the brain activity patterns we have analyzed, it would be like continuous psychological torture." The room fell silent as everyone understood what this meant. Every alien they had worked with, traded with, and befriended over the decades. They were all still alive, trapped inside their own bodies, forced to watch as something else used their forms to deceive and destroy their own species. Commander Haewon had been quiet during the whole briefing. Finally, she spoke up. "Sir, if this technology can affect every known alien species except humans, then we are not just the only ones who detected the invasion. We are the only ones left who can fight it." Admiral Jae Sung nodded slowly. The galaxy that humanity had worked so hard to join was disappearing. The friends they had made, the allies they had trusted, the enemies they had respected, all of them were gone, replaced by puppet versions controlled by something that saw individual thinking as a problem to be solved. "Send word to all human colonies and outposts," he ordered. "Full military alert. Assume any non-human contact is potentially hostile, and start preparing for the possibility that we might be the last free species in the galaxy." Outside the war room windows, Earth continued its peaceful rotation around the sun. But the galaxy beyond was no longer the vast community of different species that humans had dreamed of joining. It was becoming something else entirely, a huge machine wearing the faces of the dead. And humanity was the only species left that remembered what those faces had looked like when they were still alive and free. The invasion was not coming from outside. It had been growing inside the galaxy for years, using the trust and cooperation between species as a weapon against them. Now only the humans remained to witness what was left of a galaxy that had forgotten how to be itself.